Hi Ceramics 2! For your first throwing project, you're going to learn how to make bowls. Don't forget, always wedge your clay before you start throwing. You're going to want about 2 pounds of clay. We're going to learn how to throw a bowl on the wheel so that we can later carve a foot ring into it. I wanted to show you a few foot rings so that you have an idea about what you will do. That will determine how you throw the bowl. A foot ring is any part of the pot that elevates the body off of the ground. This one has a particularly tall foot ring. When the pot was thrown, it had probably this much clay on the sides that was later carved away. That clay helps support the walls of the bowl and then later left enough that this tall foot ring could be carved. Here's an example that has a shorter foot ring, but you can start to see how you could get creative with the decorative elements that you might carve into the sides later. This one has a shallower foot ring. It probably didn't need quite as much clay left when the pot was thrown, but still elevates the pot slightly so that the center can be glazed. Anytime you're throwing something wide, it's best if you throw it on a bat. That way you don't have to pick it up when you're done. So I'm putting a bat on my wheel, and I've wedged my clay. I'm gonna throw it on center. I like to start by making sure that my mound of clay looks as centered as it can be before I turn my wheel on. By centering the clay. You may want to try coning now that we're using a larger piece of clay. I'm squeezing in on both sides, bringing the clay up. And then I'm pushing down right on the top, and it's almost like I'm turning the clay inside out. Bringing it back down. This helps make sure that it's centered on the inside of the clay. It also helps make sure you don't have any air pockets in there. I'm going to open it up, and when you're making a bowl, the thing that you want to remember is to leave extra clay at the bottom. You want to leave about 1 inch because we are going to trim these bowls. So I'm opening it up. Taking my needle tool, and I'm going to measure. That's about 1 inch. I'm going to open it up nice and wide. I can open it up as far as the outside of my ball of clay here. Then I'm going to want to make sure that I compress that bottom. So I'm either going to use a sponge or I can use a tool. All I'm doing is pushing on that bottom. The wider our base is, the more likely it is to crack. Compress the rim. So I'm just pushing down on the rim, holding on either side. Now I'm going to start pulling up my walls. This is a little bit different than making a cylinder in that as I pull, I'm going to pull outward so that I can start getting that bowl shape. So I'll make a notch under this big ring of clay. Start to move that clay upward. And now when I do my pull, I'm gonna lean in a little heavier on my inside hand. And my bowl begins to get wider. Ease away from the rim. And that's probably it. I think I moved all of that clay. So I'm compressing again, just pushing down with my sponge on the bottom, making sure that clay is fully compressed so I don't get any cracks. Then I'm going to take my metal rib and I'm going to start removing the slip and the throwing rings. So I'll start with the outside. Oh, look at all that slip on there that I'm removing. I'll trim a little bit of the bottom, but since we're going to trim these after the pot comes off the wheel, it's not as important, but it'll just make my life a little easier to get rid of some of this clay now. Sometimes we want to leave that clay there because it supports the walls as they dry. Run my needle tool under there and pull that clay away. Okay, now I'm going to work on the inside of my bowl, and I like to use a rounded rib, because what I don't want is this little divot right here where the bottom meets the wall. So using that rounded rib, I'm going to shape the bowl so it has a nice, really smooth transition, a smooth curve. I don't want a place where I can imagine liquid would gather if I was eating cereal or soup. That looks nice. Now I'll just use the metal rib to remove any slip that's on the inside. I'm going to brace just slightly with my outside hand. And one last time, this is also compressing the walls of my pot to prevent cracking. All right, one last thing to do is shape up this rim. Just using my finger determine what shape I would like that to be. And there's my bowl. Now I just need to wait till it becomes leather hard, and that way I will be ready to trim. Now I don't even have to touch this pot again until it's leather hard because I threw it on a bat. So I'm just going to take the whole bat over to my shelf. It is a good idea to cut it before you let it dry. It'll be easier to take it off the bat. So I'm just going to run my wire tool underneath. Now I can go take it to my shelf.